Welcome, everyone. I'm Gwen Taraska, Director of the Climate Program at Ocean Conservancy, and we're really pleased to have you here for this discussion on the ambitious climate action that we need to see in advance of COP26, as well as the role of the ocean and ocean-based climate solutions. We have a few pieces of housekeeping before we begin. First, at the bottom right of your screen, you'll find the translation control, where you can select a channel in English or in Spanish. Second, if you have any tech issues during the event, please contact Cody Sullivan, our climate communications lead, whose email address will be in the chat. And third, the Q&A function will be open after our keynote, so you can propose topics for the Q&A portion that will be at the end of the program. This event is hosted by the Pacific Rim Ocean Climate Action Partnership and organized by Ocean Conservancy and the UN Foundation. And with that, I am extremely pleased to turn it over to Janice Earls Jones, CEO of Ocean Conservancy, for opening remarks to frame today's discussion. Janice, over to you.
Thank you, Gwen, and my thanks to all of you who are joining us today. I am honored to join this distinguished group of global leaders who are at the forefront of addressing the ocean and climate crises. So why are we here today? To answer this question, we need to only look at what is happening in our own backyards. Here in the United States, we are facing historic wildfires in the West, which have destroyed communities, burned millions of acres of forest, and created the most hazardous air quality on the planet. I'm joining you from Portland, Oregon, where we've been lucky enough to not have to evacuate and have finally emerged from hazardous air quality. At the same time as the West burns, we're also facing rapidly intensifying hurricanes with widespread impacts in the Gulf of Mexico. We're in the midst of a record-breaking Atlantic hurricane season, and we know that these big, destructive storms are hitting the United States 3 times more frequently than a century ago. Much the same way that the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed the cracks in our global system, the recent wildfires and extreme weather are exposing the risk that climate inaction poses to us all. And of course, climate change isn't just hurting those of us in the United States. Around the world, climate change is making worse not only extreme weather events, but also slow onset events, from sea level rise to ocean acidification to shifting fish populations. These slow onset events can devastate our communities and our livelihoods with disproportionate impacts on communities of color. We are at an all hands on deck moment to confront the climate crisis. People around the world are demanding decisive leadership and concrete actions from all of us to protect our planet for current generations and for our shared future. The ocean is an important part of the climate solution. Ocean-based measures from decreasing shipping emissions to protecting blue carbon ecosystems can strengthen climate action from the local to global scale. I am very encouraged by the creation of leadership coalitions such as the Pacific Rim Ocean Climate Partnership, which is working to drive climate action, including ocean climate solutions, from the largest and deepest ocean in the world. Coalitions such as these are essential to set the agenda for ambitious ocean and climate stewardship. We know that no single actor, no matter how powerful, can solve the climate crisis alone. Instead, we need to drive change across the public and private sectors and across multiple levels of government, including the international, national, regional, and local levels. We are entering a critical moment for climate action. In 2021, we need countries to dramatically increase their overall ambition under the Paris Agreement. And countries will also have a range of opportunities to bring the power of the ocean to the global fight against climate change. Last year's UN Climate Summit, COP25, was a failure in many ways, but several countries, including some with us today, worked tirelessly to ensure that it mandated a dialogue among all countries to consider how to strengthen ocean-based mitigation and adaptation. That dialogue is coming up this fall. And going forward, governments will have the opportunity to ensure that they include ocean-based solutions in their new climate goals, such as their nationally determined contributions, and work toward a COP26 decision that creates an ongoing forum for the ocean in the UN climate regime. For too long, ocean and climate issues have been siloed to the detriment of both, and we don't have a moment to lose. We look forward to continue working with all of you to advance climate action globally, including the ocean solutions that can help build climate resilience and eliminate carbon pollution. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. We're now going to turn to Elizabeth Cousins, President and CEO of the UN Foundation, with remarks to introduce our keynote speaker. Elizabeth?
Excellencies, distinguished guests, good colleagues, and friends. My name is Elizabeth Cousins. I'm the President and CEO of the United Nations Foundation, and along with our good colleagues at the Ocean Conservancy, I am honored to welcome you to today's important discussion on a blue-green future, advancing ocean climate solutions in the arc toward COP26. For more than 20 years, the UN Foundation has collaborated with the United Nations to help take on the world's biggest challenges. And today, we face the fight of our lives. Our health, the equity and promise of our societies, our planet, are all threatened by overlapping crises that challenge humanity as never before. Our climate, our oceans, and the myriad species that make our world so habitable are under extreme duress. Just as they are threatened in interconnected ways, so must they be solved by understanding their linkages and tackling them together. That is why we are so pleased to co-host today's important discussion with both the Ocean Conservancy and with the governments of the Pacific Rim Ocean Climate Action Partnership. I'm particularly honored to introduce our distinguished keynote speaker. He is a former US Secretary of State, former US Senator, current visiting distinguished statesman at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and forever a planetary champion, Secretary John Kerry. No one could help better connect the dots across the ocean, climate, biodiversity agenda than Secretary Kerry. From his childhood on Cape Cod to his years in the US Congress, his tenure as Secretary of State, and his unrelenting daily advocacy for the oceans and climate today, Secretary Kerry's love of the ocean runs deep. In 2014, Secretary Kerry launched the Our Ocean Conference to inspire and challenge governments, entrepreneurs, scientists, and civil society to protect and conserve our ocean. His diplomacy at the highest levels of global leadership led to the creation of the Ross Sea Region Marine Protected Area, still the world's largest marine protected area. His leadership in the run-up to the Paris Climate Agreement was absolutely instrumental in reaching that path-breaking deal. And he was among the first to seek to unite the ocean and climate communities in common purpose. Few leaders before or since have done more for the climate and the ocean or lived that commitment so deeply in their daily lives. I can therefore think of no one better to open our discussion on our blue-green future than Secretary John Kerry. Secretary Kerry, thank you for joining us, and over to you.
Thank you very much for the chance to join so many ministers and NGOs, all of whom have been for so long at the forefront of the battle to be able to save our oceans. I don't have to tell anybody this is a tough year. And a UN Climate Week that's virtual by necessity just underscores that. And we all hope this is not something that we have to repeat. But the fact that we are where we are should remind all of us of the fragility of life and the importance of listening to experts and to scientists. COVID is a global tragedy, but it's also a preview of what climate change can bring if we don't act. And every one of you understands that too well, and all of you are leading in an effort to push back against deniers and procrastinators and major financial interests that just somehow don't yet see how the future is really written in responding responsibly, getting ahead of the curve, not waiting to clean up and spend trillions on the damage. Whether it's through the United Nations initiatives or through the Our Oceans conferences, I think we can all be glad that the last several years have brought a much greater focus on the challenge, including 200 promises to establish, fund or strengthen marine protected areas and create more than 13 million square kilometers of protected areas. That is progress. But the truth is, I think everybody knows it isn't anywhere near close to where we need to be for all of the reasons that are bringing us together virtually today. Every one of us here knows that you cannot protect the oceans without solving climate change, and you can't solve climate change without protecting the oceans. And we all know that today, the world isn't doing either one of those things with the urgency so desperately needed. I was in Madrid, like many of you. The COP25 decision text included a section on ocean climate action for the very first time. That's important. And I think we have to underscore that these can't be siloed issues. They're really all connected. But despite the importance of the words paragraph in a document, I think it's important for us to be honest that Madrid was fundamentally a failure, and we know why. A few big countries kicked the can down the road, and 3 countries in particular refused to allow positive things that happen to happen. 1, Australia, 2, Brazil, and 3, my country, the United States of America. For the first time that I can remember since being involved in these issues, my country acting as a major hurdle to our ability to be able to move forward. On oceans, Madrid's mandate did not result in increasing the world's ambition on climate. It mandated a dialogue about ocean-based mitigation and adaptation solutions. But my friends, we're just past the point of talking. And we obviously need all of us globally to take much more action than we are taking. When we met in Paris, and I had the privilege of leading our negotiating effort and of working with China as a lead up to Paris, we knew that what we were doing there was not going to be mandatory. We knew, because it couldn't be politically, we knew that we weren't going to be able to hold the Earth's temperature to 2 degrees centigrade. And today, indeed, if we did everything that was set out to be done in Paris, the Earth's temperature would still be rising to 3.7 degrees centigrade. The problem is we're not doing everything that we set out to do. And so, in fact, we're on a curve to achieve maybe 4.1 to 4.5 degrees centigrade by the end of this century. And every one of you knows that is catastrophic. The consequences of that financially, in terms of politics, migration, refugees, food production, water, run the list. Science tells us that the consequences of that are catastrophic. So actions have to be taken here. And actions that have to be taken when we already see all over the globe way too much money chasing too few fish. We have to take action when we know that rising carbon dioxide levels from emissions are still increasing ocean acidity, devastating coral reefs, and having a major negative impact on spawning grounds and marine life. We have to take action when we know that nearly 60% of global fish stocks are fished at maximum levels now, and 33% are overfished and in need of recovery. We need action because time is running out. Climate change itself is altering the basic chemistry of the oceans faster than it has in the last 50 million years. And yes, we know what happened in the last 50 million years because of science. By the middle of this century, there will be more plastic in the water than fish at the rate we're going. But there's also something that's been missing from the dialogue, which is the size of the upside of taking action. There is really a huge upside, and we can provide the solution to this challenge, not only of climate, but also of the oceans, if we exercise greater leadership and better decision-making. And if we start doing it right now, so that Glasgow can be a success. We all need to do more, and we all need to do it now. it is totally within our reach to be able to decrease emissions from shipping, from ports, to ramp up sustainably sited offshore renewable energy, to protect and restore coastal ecosystems that store carbon. And that's just the beginning. We all know the way forward. We've established the first generation of great parks in the sea and protected marine environments that rival the Grand Canyon, the Torres del Paine, the Serengeti. But we all have to acknowledge that it's okay. I mean, it's nice to put the perimeter of a marine protected area, big MPA, on a signage and run around and beat our chests and say, hey, we created this area. But we got to face up to the reality that you can't happily announce these at global events if we don't have real protection and real enforcement. And everybody knows that we're at about 1% of all the areas that are in fact in real enforcement. And the level of protection is what actually really determines the outcomes for conservation, for fisheries, and for climate mitigation. I've been working with Donna Bertarelli and the Bertarelli Foundation to continue the global push to strongly protect 30% of the oceans. And the goal here is not to make announcements. The goal is to get outcomes. The goal is to make sure that protected means protected. And the words actually have to mean something. They have to have teeth. So it's important for all of us to recommit here. We're going to have to take steps. And these are not steps that somehow undo our economies or attack our standard of living. On the contrary, these are steps that can provide millions of higher paying jobs. These are steps that can reduce the amount of cancer, reduce the level of pollution that in fact has a negative impact on lungs all around the world. We have the ability to be able to have better health, better standard of living as a result of the jobs that we create. We have an ability to be able to build back better after COVID-19 by putting in place economic measures that will in fact be sustainable, meet the ESG and the global development standards. All of these things can happen, but we have to make the decisions to actually make that happen. We are not facing a deficit of capacity. We haven't even put some of our great universities and laboratories to the real task of creating a consortia to work at the discovery of many of these things. We haven't done the kind of innovation that we know we're really capable of. It's just been far too rhetorical and it's been far too political, and the politics are the politics of avoidance. So in the end, my friends, and I say this as a person who acknowledges the degree to which my country in the last several years has made it very difficult and has really angered some people, and I understand that anger. But I believe that we have the capacity. I'm optimistic because I know what we've been able to do when we come together in good faith, and I know that it is possible that we will be able to come together in good faith again soon. So the stakes don't get any bigger. Resolving climate change and saving oceans, which goes hand in hand, is the great challenge of our time. We can do it. We can do it before the reefs are gone. We can do it before more species are wiped out. We can do it before plastics and pollution become the leading chapters of a history that we can't afford to write. That's really what this is all about. And I hope and pray everyone will buckle down and we will go to Glasgow and we will get the job done. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary, for your inspirational remarks, and it's really a perfect segue to our next speaker. We are very pleased to welcome Gonzalo Munoz, High-Level Climate Action Champion for Chile, for his thoughts on mobilizing a holistic response to the climate crisis. Gonzalo, you have the floor.
Thank you, Wayne, and thank you to Ocean Conservancy for the opportunity of speaking in this session. Well, as many of the aspects that that Secretary Kerry already mentioned, we all know that since 1980s, oceans have absorbed up to 20–30% of total anthropogenic CO2 emissions, and since the 1970s, they have taken up more than 90% of excess heat in the climate system. Those are scientific data and really fundamental to take into consideration. But also now we have the IPCC Special Report on Ocean and Cryosphere in the Changing Climate, released last September or last year, that confirmed that the ocean is warmer, more acidic, and less productive now, and that melting glaciers and ice sheets have caused sea level rise. At 2 degrees, potentially, of course, more than 99% of coral reefs are projected to be lost. Even at 1.5 degrees, they are projected to decline by 70–90%. So definitely climate change is the greatest threat to the oceans and the coastal communities that rely on its health. It is now a critical moment to get the global fight against climate change on track. Yet we must remember that the ocean is also a source of sustainable climate solutions. For too long, the climate and ocean conservation efforts have been siloed. Also, Secretary Kerry also referred to that. But over the last few years, we've seen a movement to break down those silos and to bring the power of the ocean, including ocean-based climate solutions, to the larger climate effort. At 1.5 degrees, there will be already a small increase in ocean temperature, as well as associated increase in ocean acidity and decrease in ocean oxygen levels. We have to consider that. Therefore, we can't expect no more than 1.5 to lower the risk to marine biodiversity, fisheries, and ecosystems, and their functions and services to humans and to all of the other species. Also, we know that during COP25, this blue COP, the decision text, for example, included a section on ocean climate action for the first time, and we are proud of that, which now mandated a dialogue to ensure countries are aware of the range of ocean-based mitigation and adaptation solutions. The upcoming dialogue is a key moment to raise awareness around the key role that ocean-based solutions can play to support economy-wide decarbonization and resilience to the impacts of climate change. This dialogue is expected to happen during the UNFCCC climate change dialogues in November, December this year. And this is also because we know we need to decrease emissions from the industries and sectors that are related to oceans, from shipping and ports, ramp up sustainably sited offshore renewable energy, and protect and restore coastal ecosystems that store carbon. Remember that the role of the high-level champions is related to activating and mobilizing climate action around the non-party stakeholders. So we are focusing on trying to bring those actions and those capacities of implementation right on track. We also need to create climate-ready fisheries, prepare our communities for sea level rise and flooding, combat ocean acidification, and advance climate-smart marine protected areas to confront the dual climate and biodiversity crisis. There are solutions that countries can incorporate into their NDCs and other national climate goals to increase the climate ambition and protect ocean-based communities and economies. I'm proud that Chile joined the 30-30 and it's including ocean conservation in the national strategy. We must also keep in mind that rapidly and dramatically reducing emissions is the single most important thing for ocean health. Countries must come to the table with greater ambition in their second round of NDCs in advance of COP26. I am encouraged by the creation of ambition coalitions such as the Pacific Rim Ocean Climate Partnership focusing on these issues, given that no single actor, no matter how powerful, can solve the climate crisis alone. We need coordinated action by multiple actors, including public and private sector at multiple levels, including international, national, regional, local, personal, to drive change. The Pacific Rim Ocean Climate Action Partnership will assist with these goals by driving ambitious climate action in the Pacific Rim and focusing on ocean climate solutions from the largest and deepest oceans in the world, the Pacific Ocean. These are opportunities for actions on oceans and coastal zones to support and accelerate the global mitigation effort like development of marine renewable energy and reduce emissions from ships. There are also many challenges, in particular related to adaptation, resilience, and finance. And as I said, as high-level champions committed to driving action from non-party stakeholders, I encourage all initiatives working on climate action to take part on the Marrakesh Partnership. At this moment, we're developing climate action pathways for 1.5 degrees, and oceans and coastal zones are really important part of achieving this. Together with all actors, countries, private sector, investors, cities, universities, subnationals, we will be able to achieve the most ambitious path for oceans. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gonzalo. So the Q&A function is open, so please do submit any questions you may have for Gonzalo or for any of our upcoming speakers, and we will try to cover those topics during the Q&A portion. Let's now turn to our Pacific Rim governments to discuss how governments and leadership coalitions and the UNFCCC can really advance ocean and climate action. Moderating the conversation is my colleague, Luis Esteves Salmeron, Senior Manager of Government Relations at Ocean Conservancy. Luis?
Thank you, Wynn. So as Wynn mentioned, my name is Luis Esteves Salmeron, and I'm a Senior Manager for International Government Relations at Ocean Conservancy. It is my great pleasure to introduce our distinguished speakers who will be discussing how governments, ambition coalitions, and the UNFCCC can elevate ocean climate solutions. After the remarks, I just want to remind you that we will have a short discussion panel. So without further ado, our first speaker is Minister Ayaz Sayed Qayyum, Minister for Economy of Fiji. You have the floor, Minister.
Buluminaka, and a very good morning to you. Before I begin, I'd also like to offer Fiji's sympathies to Secretary Crawford and the people of California as they contend with some of the most ferocious wildfires their state has ever seen. Your friends in Fiji know you're suffering as we contend with the devastation brought by extreme cyclones and the rising seas. Like Secretary Crawford, we also know that the science is clear and there is unequivocal evidence to prove that our planet is getting hotter, not cooler, that lives depend on our action and ability to drastically cut global carbon emissions. The urgency to reduce global emissions and the imperative to save our oceans are intimately and inextricably linked. Our oceans have buffered us from the full brunt of the damage we have inflicted on our climate, absorbing 25% of human carbon emissions since the 1980s. But this vital protection has come at a great cost. The rate of ocean warming has more than approach to addressing climate and ocean health. The implication of non-action will ripple across our supply chains and economies for decades to come. A healthy ocean is a pillar of Fijian well-being. Its bounty provides our people jobs and with food, and its beauty is the cornerstone of a vital tourism sector. Today, with international flights mostly grounded, Fiji's oceans have remained our gateway to the world. Our Blue Lanes initiative allows ocean-going travelers to quarantine at sea en route to Fiji, where a negative COVID test then allows them the freedom to explore our waters. But while our culture, economy, and livelihoods are bound up and intertwined with our ocean, this dependency gives us a front row seat to the steady degradation of our vital ocean resources. While this pandemic has postponed the UN Oceans Conference and COP26, it has not delayed the degradation of our oceans, which continue to buckle under the strain of global emissions. Even if achieved today, our collective ocean climate commitments will not avert catastrophe. We may well see the extinction of our reefs in the next decade. The seas are already lapping at the doorsteps of our homes in Fiji, Miami, Venice, Cairo, and Dhaka will continue to rise irrespective of our actions today. Our only opportunity now is to strive to reduce the long-term scale of the threat. It has been estimated that the ocean economy today generates a gross marine product of US $2.5 trillion, and that our shared ocean assets could be valued at approximately US $24 trillion. If anything, these are severe underestimates. Irrespective, these assets are our intergenerational inheritance. If we squander their endowment, if we fuel our COVID-19 recovery by renewing our salt and ocean ecosystems, we will struggle to solve one crisis while worsening another, one with far graver implications, of course. Instead, our understanding of the ocean's climate nexus must sit at the heart of our COVID-19 recovery and throughout all development planning. Fiji knows this. It is why we are pursuing a big blue ideas through our nationally determined contribution to the Paris Agreement. It is why our soon-to-be launched national ocean policy aims for the 100% sustainable management of Fiji's 1.2 million square kilometers of ocean, 30% of which will be designated as marine protected areas by 2030. It is why we've committed to planting 1 million corals by 2021, why we placed a moratorium on deep sea mining, why we are stepping up fisheries enforcement to stop illegal fishing, and why we're resorting in protecting our mangrove forests and seagrass fields, and also why we are shifting to low carbon shipping. We have also banned single-use plastics and will soon ban styrofoam actually from 1st Jan next year. And it is why we fought so hard at COP25, the Blue COP, to ingrain the health of oceans as a key indicator and factor in assessing and shaping climate action under the UNFCCC. We don't see Fiji's record as an excuse to lecture the world. There is much more work that must be done. Besides, this isn't some competition. We are all on the same team. And whether we act like it or not, we all share a common future. By 2050, our oceans will either tell a story of narrowly averted disaster or one of outright failure. Let's please all face up to our shared burden and together achieve success. Vinaka, thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister Syed Qayyum. Our next speaker is going to be Wade Crawford, Secretary of Natural Resources of California. Thank you for joining us, Secretary Crawford.
Thank you very much, Luis, and thank you, Minister, for the kind words and thoughts as we contend with over 24 major wildfires in our state. California, like so many other jurisdictions on the phone, is already experiencing the impact of climate change. Impacts that our estimates didn't suggest would materialize until the middle part of the century have obviously accelerated. We are only partway through our wildfire season, and already almost 4 million acres of our lands have burned, well over, I think, 1.5 million hectares, and more potentially is to come. We have indicated wherever and whenever possible that the science is clear, the facts are apparent. Climate is already impacting our communities and our natural places in California. We obviously not only are threatened by catastrophic wildfire and drought and flooding and extreme heat that we experienced, but obviously the impacts of a changing climate on our ocean, namely sea level rise and coastal erosion that threaten the very existence of California's iconic beaches by the end of the century, major warming and acidification that are already changing our environment along the coast. I think the point I want to make today is how thankful we are of the PROCAP jurisdictions who are part of this alliance, a coalition of leaders across the Pacific Ocean, our world's largest ocean, that are taking real action, both to reduce carbon pollution from our ocean-based economy, but importantly, to build the climate resilience of our ocean. While we advocate for our federal government in the United States to do more and to be more vocal and frankly, more of a world leader on climate action, I want to assure you that so many states across our country are in full allegiance with world leaders on the importance of taking action on climate change. And in California, as a state, as a subnational jurisdiction, we're actually leaning forward quite aggressively on climate action on our oceans and coasts. About 1,300 miles of coast we have responsibility for, which translates to almost 2,000 kilometers of coastal environment. In the United States, waters from the tide line up to 3 miles out are state jurisdiction. And within that jurisdiction, we have created a network of 126 marine protected areas. This is a practice that many of our Pacific Island states have been engaged in from time immemorial around preserving the ocean-based resources. And we've learned a lot from them to establish our own network of marine protected areas. About 16% of our state waters are within this realm of protection, which is really quite important. We've also joined an effort along with Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia to collectively tackle ocean acidification. Now, we all know ocean acidification is a global challenge, and we can't control, obviously, the global emissions from our 4 subnational jurisdictions across 2 countries, but we can limit the runoff and other factors that worsen ocean acidification on our land. And so we're engaged in a very aggressive action plan on that. Likewise, we have a very aggressive target to restore many of our coastal wetlands along California. Many of these wetlands have been claimed for other uses over time. And if we are able to restore those wetlands at large scale, we actually create a buffer to storm surge driven by sea level rise, and also obviously help protect our plants and animals that are threatened with climate change. All of this is encapsulated in an action plan that we announced actually after many of us were together at COP25 in Madrid late last year. And that is our California Oceans and Coasts Action Plan that is a strong priority of our Governor, Gavin Newsom. So please know that we in California are very excited to be part of this international movement, particularly organized around the Pacific Ocean, that we are really excited to continue to learn from our partners around what's worked in your jurisdictions. And we are 100% committed to being a strong collective voice as we move to COP26 on the importance of oceans within international climate frameworks. So thanks, Luis, for you and all the work that your team is doing to organize this. And I look forward to shared progress in coming months.
Thank you so much, Secretary Crawford, and we look forward to actually getting those updates in the near future. Our next speaker will be the Minister of Environment of Costa Rica, Andrea Mesa. Bienvenida, Ministra.
Gracias, Luis, and hello to everyone. It's a pleasure of being here and also to be sharing these ideas of how to bring the power of the ocean into this climate world and this climate discussions. And I think, as my previous speakers have been mentioning, that we need to stop working in silos, and that the Blue Cup was a starting point, but it was just the starting point, that we really need to move faster and start implementing concrete actions to protect our oceans, to protect these very fragile ecosystems. And I think that ocean-based solutions are there that we can be implementing and including them right now in the processes of the enhancement of the NDCs. We're all working in this enhancement of the NDCs, and it's an opportunity to include specific targets there around ocean-based solutions and also around the decreasing of shipping emissions. And there are some difficult situations around how to address this, but we really need to see fossil fuel subsidies. It's something that it is there. It's something that sometimes we don't want to address, but it is, we really need to have integral, concrete actions around these elements. In our case, we generated our long-term strategy, our decarbonization plan, and within that plan, we included some specific targets around the protection of wetlands and mangroves. But besides that, we are very clear that we need to continue working in partnerships as the Pacific Rim Ocean and Climate Action Partnership, and also to continue working in championing, for example, it's something that we are doing as Costa Rica, the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People, together with friends and over 30 countries with a clear goal to protect 30% of marine and terrestrial areas by 2030. And here, in the case of Costa Rica, that we are saying we need to walk the talk. And in our case, more than 25% of the terrestrial area, it's under any, under a protected area, some category. But just 2% of our ocean is under some category. So we are working there to increase the area, and the goal that we have is to really move it to the 30%. We really want to achieve that goal in the next coming years. It's something that we want to achieve, and we are very committed with this because we know that we need the power of the ocean to continue. And we are also working a lot with the youth and also with the science community. There is a lot of talent, a lot of information, and we are working to see how can we integrate specific measures in the policies and also in some of the specific projects that we have. One thing that we are very clear is that we need healthy ecosystems to have healthy communities, and we're working very hard to achieve these goals. I know that just to have a mandate on the dialogue doesn't sound too hard, but I was there when we were negotiating, and believe me, it was hard to include that. So we're also very proud that at the end we managed to include the ocean and the climate change elements, and we really want to see more concrete results in the next COP. And we're working for that, and I'm very happy to be part of this community.
Thank you so much, Minister Mesa, and we're always looking up to Costa Rica to support these ocean climate based solutions and agenda. So thank you so much for your participation. Our next speaker is Gabriel Quijandría, Vice Minister for Strategic Development of Natural Resources from the Ministry of Environment of Peru. Thank you for joining us, Vice Minister.
Muchas gracias, Luis. Y en primer lugar, reciban un cordial saludo todos desde Lima, la única capital sudamericana que está ubicada en la costa del Océano Pacífico, ¿no? Lo cual es un poco raro para un país que normalmente es reconocido como país andino o amazónico, pero somos el único que tiene la capital localizada en la costa, ¿no? Quiero agradecer a The Ocean Conservancy por la invitación para ser parte de este panel. Disculparme por llegar un poquito tarde. Ustedes saben que el New York Climate Week hace que uno esté corriendo, aunque uno haya quedado en su casa, esta vez, ¿no? Hay que saltar, en este caso, de pantalla a pantalla. El Perú es un país que está a un año de cumplir 200 años de independencia, ¿no? Y como tal viene dando pasos firmes para lograr cambiar su modelo hacia el desarrollo sostenible, un desarrollo bajo en carbono, resiliente al clima e inclusivo, donde además la naturaleza tenga un rol preponderante. Tenemos claro que la salud de nuestros océanos está íntimamente ligada a nuestra salud. Sabemos que los océanos cumplen un rol fundamental en la regulación del clima, producen oxígeno, contienen gran cantidad de la biodiversidad del mundo, son fuente de alimentación y medios de vida para al menos unas 2.500 millones de personas, o 40% de la población mundial, que viven entre los primeros 100 kilómetros de distancia a la línea de costa, ¿no? En el caso del Perú, debemos señalar además que incluso la civilización nos llegó del mar, tal como evidencian los descubrimientos arqueológicos en Caral, cultura que se desarrolló en la costa norte del Perú alrededor de 5.000 años atrás, a partir de contar con un excedente alimentario provisto por el mar, y que todavía hoy genera un aporte importantísimo para la economía del país, la anchoveta, la cual constituye la pesquería monoespecífica más grande del mundo. Por otro lado, siendo el país en cuyas costas se manifiesta de manera más intensa el fenómeno del Niño, tal como trágicamente lo experimentamos
Particularly saw in 1925, in 1983, in 1997, and recently in 2017, So it's very clear that we need to promote greater climate ambitions so we can reduce the risk of the increase in frequency of this anomaly, as concluded by numerous scientific studies, and that say that this could happen. So for all these reasons, I'm going to share with you some of our latest advancements. They're part of our 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, especially linked to climate action and conservation and sustainable use of oceans, seas, and marine resources. So first, we've been implementing 153 adaptation and mitigation measures against climate change. In adaptation, we prioritize fishing and aquaculture. We've identified 18 measures focused on industrial fishing, small-scale fishing, and aquaculture. At the end of the year, we're going to present our new nationally determined contributions with a greater sense of urgency, ambition, and transparency, both in adaptation and mitigation. So second, in November, we approved our National Adaptation Plan on the road to 2050, where we include the analysis of risks of the effects of climate change on fish and aquaculture. This plan will be our point of reference, one of our basic point of reference for the update of our national climate change strategy on route to 2050. Now, third, we've been implementing our climate change law and regulation, and in that context, we're establishing measures that incorporate adaptation and mitigation in public and private investment projects, which include some specific fishing projects, for example, small-scale fisheries and other economic and trade activities like tourism. Fourth, we've also been driving the consolidation and establishment of new protected marine areas like Dorsal de Nazca National Reserve and Mar Tropical de Grau National Reserve. These reserves were very important in terms of biology, ecology, and social economically. They have underground mountains and rocky reefs that will allow the conservation of species like whales, dolphins, manta rays, sea turtles, and other many species that can be traded and are the basis of recognized gastronomy. Now, with these new areas, we will conserve approximately 8% of Peru's coastal and marine areas, which will allow us to comply with our 11th goal of the Aichi. We've also been working together with our neighboring countries where we share the Humboldt and Niño currents, Chile and Ecuador. So we want to coordinate our fishing management to have a focus based on ecosystems, and that way we can also create some cross-learning. So finally, our fishing industry is committed to taking care of the environment and is a leader in the implementation of circular economy actions. This way we have contributed to reducing greenhouse gases. We control 100% of our effluents, and we reuse 100% of our waste and transform fishing waste into fertilizers. Finally, we'd like to congratulate PROCAP for organizing this event that allows us to share actions that we've been implementing for a green and blue development that's
resiliente al clima, donde cada pequeño esfuerzo cuente para hacer grandes cambios, sin dejar a nadie atrás. Muchas gracias.
For describing, all the initiatives Peru is working on. Our next speaker is Ligia Castro de Doens. She's the National Director for Climate Change of Panama. Thank you for joining us, Directora.
Buenas tardes. Muy agradecida por la invitación a Panamá. En este momento nos encontramos trabajando en la actualización de la política de cambio climático que data del 2007 y que estaba relacionada con el protocolo de Kyoto. Estamos actualizando la política, enmarcándola en el Acuerdo de París y tiene un rol importante en ella los sistemas marino-costeros. Estamos también en este momento trabajando en la elaboración de la Ley Marco de Cambio Climático de Panamá y trabajando el informe de contribuciones determinadas nacionalmente, que entregaremos la primera semana de diciembre a la Convención Marco. En el primer informe de NDC de Panamá había entregado dos compromisos, el de deforestación y el de generación de energías renovables. Hemos revisado, estamos ampliando los compromisos e incrementando la ambición. Además de estos dos, estamos incluyendo 8 nuevos, entre los cuales está el sector marino costero. Y algunos que de alguna forma también van a contribuir a mejorar las condiciones marinas costeras, como es el tema de la economía circular, que nos va a permitir tanto reducción de emisiones como de desechos en las áreas marino-costeras. Para el 2021 nos vamos a basar en este informe que vamos a entregar en diciembre de este año de NDC para trabajar el Plan Nacional de Acción Climática, que va a tener compromisos muy bien definidos a corto, mediano y largo plazo, y que se va a trabajar como un plan de inversiones en coordinación con el Ministerio de Economía y Finanzas, que incluye la Guía Técnica de Adaptación Sectorial para los Sistemas Costeros, que va a permitir también que podamos adaptar ecosistemas y comunidades y sistemas productivos costeros en nuestro país. Nosotros tenemos tanto en el Pacífico como en el Atlántico costas, y por supuesto que se aplicaría en ambas costas. Estamos trabajando también en ampliar las áreas protegidas marinas y en fortalecer lo que es la fiscalización, monitoreo y control de la conservación de las actuales que ya tenemos. Estamos desarrollando proyectos de restauración de manglares y ecosistemas asociados en las costas tanto del Caribe como del Atlántico, pero lo estamos haciendo con las comunidades organizadas. También dándoles un modo sostenible de vida, basado en la producción sostenible, por ejemplo, de conchas y de ostras. Adicionalmente, las áreas marinas protegidas, estamos trabajando en la formulación de un proyecto de planificación espacial marina que fortalezca el sistema de áreas protegidas y que impulse una cadena de valor de pesca en las islas, en toda el área tanto Pacífico como Atlántico. Estamos trabajando la Política Nacional de Océanos y el Plan de Acción Nacional para la Basura Marina, que también van a contribuir sustancialmente al cumplir con nuestros compromiso nacional determinado de sistemas costeros y marinos, pero además también que tendrán proyectos específicos de inversión en el Plan de Acción Climática. Básicamente en eso estamos trabajando muy activamente. Hemos incluido en este esfuerzo del informe, y trabajaremos con ellos para el Plan Nacional de Acción Climática, a la empresa privada, al resto de las instituciones públicas, a una gran parte de la juventud organizada que muy activamente está participando, y por supuesto también a la academia y a la comunidad científica, entendiendo que el futuro está en nuestras manos y que es tiempo de actuar. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, directora. Our last speaker for this segment of the agenda is Ambassador Patricia Fuller. We're very excited to have you on board. Please, the floor is yours, Ambassador.
Thank you, Luis. And thank you to the Ocean Conservancy and to ProCap for the invitation, and greetings to my Pacific country colleagues. It's lovely to see you here on the screen. It's the next best thing to being together in New York, and I'm feeling envious here in Ottawa as to how far I am away from the Pacific Ocean relative to all of you. But certainly Canada is a country with the longest shoreline in the world, so oceans are very vital to us. And as has been said already, they are, of course, vital in the fight against climate change, not only for the absorption of carbon in oceans, but in particular, and I'll underline what's been said by others about the importance of ocean ecosystems in absorbing carbon. They absorb 5 times what is captured in the world's forests, if we think about what is captured in ocean ecosystems. And they're, of course, so important to
adaptation and resilience to the impact of climate change. And now we see those vulnerable populations on coasts now dealing with the pandemic on top of the impact of climate change. Certainly I want to focus on action, and in terms of action domestically in Canada, we are now up to 14% of our marine and coastal areas as being protected. So that's been a big increase in the last short while. And we also launched just a couple of years ago the Oceans Protection Plan, which is the largest investment we've ever made to make our coasts and waterways safer and healthier. And it includes an important element of partnering with coastal and Indigenous communities. And internationally, we are focused on coastal communities in particular. So I'll just mention a couple of the initiatives that we have been involved in. We launched the Oceans Plastics Charter at our G7 presidency in 2018 to combat plastic pollution. And it contains a number of specific targets. It now has 96 signatories, so that has come a long way. We're also pleased to be part of the Global Ocean Alliance that's working to advance conservation and protection of oceans. And in view of the particular importance of oceans to small island developing states, Canada provided $65 million for the World Bank Pro Blue initiative that is supporting sustainable ocean-based economies through things like reduction of marine litter. And more recently, we announced special support for climate vulnerable countries, in particular Pacific Islands, to more easily access climate finance, and that's the Climate Finance Access Network. One thing that we have to recall in all of this is the importance of mobilizing not just public dollars, but private dollars for investment in these coastal ecosystems. And that was the spirit in which we joined with Ocean Unite and AXA XL to start the Ocean Risk and Resilience Action Alliance. And this is looking at piloting innovative financing projects to drive private investment into these areas. And we're also working with Mexico and leading the action track in the Global Commission on Adaptation that's focused on nature-based solutions. And that will be profiling some interesting innovative financing models that drive private sector investment in this area. We're holding an event focused on that on October 14th. So looking forward, certainly, as has been noted, the COP26, as well as the Convention on Biological Diversity, provide key opportunities in the coming year to increase our ambition on climate change, on biodiversity, and to accelerate action to protect oceans and support ocean ecosystems and vulnerable coastal communities. So we look very much forward to working with all of you to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Fuller. And we look forward to continue collaborating with Canada and maybe have Canada consider joining ProCap in the future. So with that, I think we can go to the next item on our agenda, which is the discussion panel. And I have a set of questions for speakers today. So let's maybe get started with a question for Minister Sayed Qayyum from Fiji. So Minister, the COP25 decision section ocean climate action for the first time. As Secretary Kerry mentioned, it mandated a dialogue to ensure countries are aware of the range of ocean-based mitigation and adaptation solutions. So my questions to you are, so which should be the goals of countries for this dialogue? And how can countries use the ocean dialogue to promote increased ambition? And maybe you could also comment on what do you think can COP26 do to advance these issues?
Thank you for that. I mean, it's clearly articulated in the outcome document of COP25. A special ocean dialogue will take place before COP26 to provide an opportunity for oceans to be appropriately addressed in the climate change regime. This process has been successful as a result of extreme hard work by the Friends of the Ocean Network and our ocean leaders around the globe. And I must take this opportunity to thank everyone for their tireless efforts. It is now very timely that countries and nations work together towards this outcome. Our aim should be actually to ensure with minimum administrative burden a due recognition of oceans in the UNFCCC process, and that it is established which will help the account for the possible climate change scenario which is impeding the health of our oceans. Countries can include oceans as part of their mitigation options, ocean relevant adaptation needs and options. When it comes to the reporting, updating or enhancing of the NDCs apart from keeping the primary goal and sustain the ocean dialogue with the UNFCCC. UNFCCC must also recognize and stocktake the scale of climate action that is necessary for ocean health and also identify potential gaps and opportunities to strengthen ocean climate action. The COP26 presidency, talking about that, could take on this ambitious role and as an ocean ambassador work towards the establishment of a permanent structure for embedding the ocean dialogue within UNFCCC as a critical outcome of COP26. Lastly, this will also help, all of this will help formalize and bring about the necessary platform and mechanisms to address a plethora of issues as a result of the ocean climate nexus. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister. Our next, my next question is for Ambassador Fuller. So, Ambassador, with the Ocean Dialogue and COP26 on the horizon, as we were just discussing, let's look at the global scale now. So, the upcoming year will be critical to get the international fight against climate change on track. We all know that. This year, parties to the Paris Agreement are expected to submit new or updated emission reduction targets. So, we are at a make or break moment for climate ambition. Over the last few years, we have seen a growing movement, as other speakers have mentioned, to break down the silos between ocean and climate issues internationally, and to bring the power of the ocean, including ocean-based climate solutions, to the larger climate effort. And as you mentioned as part of your remarks, we're also seeing more public-private partnerships aimed at leveraging broad sources of financing in support of both nature and climate action. So my questions to you are there things that countries could do over the coming year to create further synergies between ocean and climate efforts? And what more can be done to strengthen collaboration, focus on nature and climate between the public and private sectors?
Thanks, Luis. Yeah, I think that to bring the ocean and climate agendas together in a very action-oriented way, the concept of nature-based solutions focused in coastal areas is a helpful lens to bring to this discussion. We've mentioned already the importance of ecosystems and carbon sequestration. I compare that to forests, and just in terms of the broader benefits in terms of resiliency as well, in the Global Commission on Adaptation, we estimated that the benefit cost ratio of restoring mangroves is as much as 10 to 1. So I think really advancing the nature-based solutions agenda, and in some discussions earlier today on nature-based solutions, it was noted that currently a very small portion of climate finance goes to nature-based solutions, even though they're estimated to have the potential to address 30% of the challenge in terms of carbon sequestration. So the efforts like what we're doing through the AURA, where we're going to be piloting blue carbon resilience credits, for example, in the Caribbean, undertaking a pre-feasibility study for mangrove insurance expanding the development of insurance products for coral reefs. Those are all ways that we can drive more private sector financing as well as public sector financing into the area of nature-based solutions.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Fuller. That is definitely very interesting information that we should all consider when working on solutions. Mr. Bess, I have a question for you about the role of ambition coalitions. So Costa Rica is one of the founding members of PROCAP, and PROCAP, as Wynn mentioned, is the first ambition coalition focuses on the largest and deepest ocean in the world, the Pacific Ocean. How do you think that this partnership, this coalition, can help drive change at the national, regional, and international levels and mobilize the necessary support that is needed to drive change?
Thank you, Luis. I think that PROCAP can really play an important role in 3 different levels, I would say. At the political level, to try to identify the specific ambitious goals that should be included in different policy instruments at the international level. I will say that also in the implementation level to facilitate knowledge sharing. I think that at the end, in the different countries, we're facing similar challenges. And sometimes it's really good to hear the specific solutions that every country has implemented. And 3, with this integration also of different stakeholders, countries, states, and there is a lot of vertical policies that sometimes we need to implement at the coastline areas, for example, that can be easier implemented when we have different stakeholders as part of these coalitions. So we really believe that to face these challenges, we need to work together. We need to work in coalitions. It's a global challenge, and the other way to have solutions is to work together, including a lot of different non-state actors, which we also think it's critical, and mobilizing a state level, which is critical. And I think PROCAP is doing a great job on that arena.
Thank you so much, Minister. And we definitely look forward as the Acting Secretary for PROCAP to continue working with all of you. So I have now a question for Panama. So we have talked about global efforts, mainly so far, national efforts. So as some people have mentioned already, we're at an all hands on deck moment for climate action. The good news is that the science is clear and we know in general what we need to do. But also people around the world are demanding decisive leadership and concrete actions. So what can countries do to deliver on our shared future? And what can countries do individually to promote the inclusion of ocean-based solutions in their climate goals? And this question is for you, Director Castro.
El reto lo hemos tenido en poder incorporar a la mayor cantidad de actores a trabajar en equipo en ese informe de compromisos determinados nacionalmente, complementando las soluciones basadas en naturaleza con soluciones basadas en el océano. Hemos logrado allí una gran participación de jóvenes muy activos y de empresa privada. Y eso ha permitido ampliar la ambición considerablemente. Las soluciones basadas en el océano también las estamos incorporando, no solamente la actualización de la política y de la ley marco de cambio climático. Estamos actualizando la normativa de evaluación de los estudios de impacto ambiental para garantizar ese complemento de soluciones basadas en naturaleza con soluciones basadas en el océano y que las actividades que hagamos en nuestras cuencas hidrográficas no afecten luego nuestras costas y nuestros océanos. Entonces, estamos también allí trabajando arduamente con la empresa privada en la reducción de huellas de carbono, pero también en el ecoetiquetado que tienen que tener bienes, productos y servicios del país que garanticen el aporte también del sector privado en la reducción de emisiones, ganando eficiencia y competitividad. Panamá es un país que tiene actividad pesquera, que tiene actividad de acuicultura, y ella tiene que ser también certificada, tiene que tener su ecoetiquetado de reducción de huella de carbono en la forma en la que desarrollamos la actividad y de cómo también contribuyen a la adaptación y la resiliencia.
Thank you so much, Directora Castro. Our next question actually is going to focus on subnational efforts. So, Secretary Crawford, regardless of how effective our mitigation strategies are, we are already feeling some serious effects of climate change, as you were discussing during your remarks. In the past 6 weeks alone, in the United States, we have seen impacts from wildfires in the West to rapidly intensifying hurricanes in the Gulf. So along our coast, we have also faced impacts ranging from shifting fish populations to sea level rise and ocean acidification. So Secretary Crawford, can you talk about what subnational governments can do to help coastal communities and ocean ecosystem build resilience?
Absolutely. So probably everybody watching knows that there is a very strong, active, ambitious coalition of subnational governments from around the world that are supporting the Conference of Parties and the UN Convention on Climate Change, with leadership from all continents: Africa, Asia, Europe, Latin America, North America. And it's very clear from our perspective as a subnational that there is quite a lot that we can do to help the nation states achieve their goals. In our country, in the United States, states have actually a lot of legal authority to protect our coastal waters and to improve or protect the quality of our oceans. In California, we have a Coastal Act, which requires quite a lot of review of any project that would impact within a half-mile of the coast. Likewise, as I mentioned, based on learning from other places around the world, we have this network of marine protected areas, this ocean acidification program, this wetlands program. So I really view subnationals can help deliver the concrete actions that Secretary Kerry talked about. At the end of the day, it is about setting strong targets at the national level, but it's more important to actually achieve those targets. And subnationals play a really important role in that. So I'm very thankful for the nation states, including Fiji and others, on your willingness to include subnationals in ProCap, because I just think we can help you as nation states meet your ambitious goals and ultimately save the oceans.
Thank you so much, Secretary. Absolutely, and the goal of ProCap is also to include other stakeholders who are relevant to these discussions, not just subnationals, but also representatives from the private sectors and other sectors. So, and that is a very good segue for our next question, which is for Gonzalo. So Gonzalo, it is clear that there is no silver bullet, that can solve the climate crisis. That's what we have been discussing, today. And that we're going to have to take action across every sector to change the course of climate change. So can you talk us through some of those and the actions we need to see from other stakeholders to move them forward?
Yeah, thank you, Luis. Sure, definitely there's no silver bullet, but we have some areas in which we can focus very rapidly and very strongly. I will quote Johan Rockström. Right? You might have heard from Johan many times saying that in order to solve the climate crisis, we have to focus on 3 F's, right? He always mentions fuel, food, and the rest are footnotes. So I very irresponsibly added 1 extra F, it's finance. So when it comes to ocean, you can somehow implement those, at least the 3 first F's in terms of course, it's fuel, and Minister Mesa mentioned it very properly. We have to work on eliminating the fossil fuel subsidies, but also we have to work very strongly on maritime and shipping industries on a rapid reduction in terms of emissions. So it's not a dream. It's a task to have at least a 50% decarbonized shipping industry by 2050. and starting now with national shipping that can be decarbonized at least 30% by 2030, and then rapidly moving towards the whole decarbonization of the maritime industry that is also so needed for other industries worldwide. We're working with Nigel, both high-level champions. We have a path around shipping and maritime, working, of course, with IMO, with the WEF, with the Global Maritime Forum, and many others, in order to see how much of that can happen much rapidly than we are expecting nowadays. And then the second one is food, and it's a lot about allowing ocean diversity to recover. We have been doing it very wrongly. We have also any other types of subsidies applying to the way we are extracting our food from the oceans in a very wrong way, and it's also about changing some of those practices inland. There's a question in the Q&A about the idea of seaweed. Yes, in Chile we are interested on implementing some of that, and hopefully we can learn again very rapidly on how to produce our food that now it's being extracted from the oceans in a wrong way, doing it in the right way, as we know it can be done. And then it's about finance, and Ambassador Fuller and Secretary Kerry mentioned it very properly. It's not only about naming what you would like to do, it's also financing and managing those areas that need to be preserved and conserved, right?
Thank you so much, Gonzalo. We definitely need everyone helping actually push these issues forward, working together. So our last question is for Peru, and this is a very relevant question given the current situation around the world. So Vice Minister Quijandría, we are currently experiencing a pandemic and looking not only at the massive public health fallout, but also the massive economic fallout. So I can imagine that it will be those two issues, public health and economy, that will be top of mind for the rest of the year and in 2021. So are you worried that climate and ocean action will take a backseat at a moment when we clearly need immediate action to address these issues?
A ver, creo que gracias Luis por la pregunta, creo que ese riesgo está presente, ¿no? Es un riesgo real de caer en una pérdida de tracción en la discusión sobre los temas ambientales, sobre los temas de cambio climático, pero creo que hay que voltear la mirada y creo que hay que identificar la situación actual generada por la pandemia como una oportunidad para cambiar completamente la forma en que nos vinculamos con la naturaleza. Creo que las soluciones basadas en la naturaleza o la incorporación de la naturaleza, digamos, como parte de las soluciones de reactivación económica, tiene que ser incluida de manera necesaria. Lo está pidiendo la sociedad, ¿no? Lo vemos en todos los países. Y no lo está pidiendo o sea, como resultado de la pandemia, sino que lo venía pidiendo mucho tiempo atrás. Pero lo que vemos ahora y lo que es distinto y esperanzador es que se está generando la evidencia dura, la data dura, para justificar la racionalidad económica detrás de esas decisiones, ¿no? Si cuando uno empieza a ver que instituciones con mandatos o con posiciones tan distintas como OECD o el BID o Greenpeace, todos empiezan a pedir Green Recovery o Blue Recovery, uno se da cuenta, bueno, algo está pasando, algo ha cambiado en realidad. Y cuando uno lo ve, y conectando un poco con lo que comentaba Gonzalo, es los actores se empiezan a dar cuenta o están ya listos para poder entrar a buscar beneficios de estas soluciones basadas en la naturaleza que se han identificado, ¿no? El Ocean Panel identificó 5 soluciones en un estudio que publicó temprano este año sobre la economía oceánica al 2050, y que ahora se han convertido además en las medidas que propone el Ocean Panel para la reactivación azul, ¿no? Y que tienen que ver, cuando uno las ve, no son medidas completamente nuevas, tienen que ver con mejorar el tema de la disposición de aguas servidas en el mar, el tema de la recuperación de ecosistemas marinos, el tema de la producción o maricultura sostenible, la producción de energía offshore, ¿no? De energía renovable en el mar, o el tema de la transición hacia las 0 emisiones en el transporte marítimo, ¿no? Como lo señalaba también Gonzalo. Entonces, claramente esas soluciones están, ¿no? Y a partir de esos estudios que yo señalaba, se empieza a ver que son evidentes, ¿no? El estudio del Ocean Panel demuestra pues que estas 5 tipos de soluciones que yo mencionaba te dan un rendimiento promedio de 5 a 1, o sea, $5 de retorno por cada dólar invertido. Yo creo que eso es un negocio que vale la pena explorar, ¿no? Y que vale la pena ver cómo podemos sacarle beneficios para generar una real recuperación, o sea, una recuperación que no sea una vuelta en círculo para estar en 5 o 10 años más frente a una nueva pandemia o a un efecto horrendo del cambio climático. Gracias.
Thank you so much. That was a very relevant question given what we're experiencing right now globally. So with that, unfortunately, we have run out of time. But before we jump off, I would like to thank everyone who joined today, especially our speakers who were very willing and share all their knowledge and expertise on how to push the ocean climate agenda forward. We look forward to continue working with you. If you have any questions about ProCap or the work of Ocean Conservancy, please feel free to actually email me. We are looking forward to seeing you in future events. And with that, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Espero que disfruten el resto de su día. Thank you so much for joining.